Hi everyone, it is always an absolute joy to spend time with my good friend RORY Duff. We always have very different conversations, and the reason for that is that RORY is such a pioneer, so unique in his work. He's, as many of you know, he barely needs any introduction these days, but he's a geobiologist. Over the last few years, he's focused on the Earth's energy lines. He's going to give us an update on that today, which is going to be exciting. And he's also set up some group meditation sort of learning modules that he's working with, which have a lot of synchronicity and a lot of telepathy happening within those groups. I'm sure we're going to touch on that. He also runs dowsing courses, seminars, other meditation courses as well. He never stops working. He has such a rich offering. He's written several books, including Grail Hunter, Grail Found, and Grail Bound. And he's going to tell us for the first time today, he's going to publicly announce a universal prophecy linked to his other book, Grail Bound, which I'm on tenterhooks to hear about because I don't know about it either. So his work has become increasingly prominent in this time of the rapid evolution of consciousness. Yeah, we always have fun, and I love the spontaneity of it because you always bring such rich information through that is, as I say, so different from anyone else's. So
there's so much goes on between the last time we speak.
I know, it's crazy. Can't keep up. So what I know everyone will be interested in is an update on the Earth's energy lines, because you have been saying that at the end of 2024, we're going to come into kind of year-round harmony for those for the next 200 years. So I know everyone will be interested, given the state of the world. Are we still on track? What's happening with the Earth's energy lines? Because originally, I think we started off at kind of one day of harmony, and then it's gradually increased and increased.
Yeah, goodness, that was back in 2007, 2008. We were looking at a heartbeat. It wasn't even a full day. The harmony time lasted for like 8-9 hours. The big Michael and Mary lines did a quick sped up to get into line with the smaller lines, and gradually the harmony frequency started building up to the frequencies of the larger lines, and then it moved into suddenly a 1.5 day frequency, and then it jumped up to 3 days, and then up to 6 days, and we were up at 6, 5, and 7, and then the next day it was 9, and it's slowly sort of edged up. And about a couple of years ago, you began to look. This is like it's going to become full year roundabout harmony, where the energies at these symmetrical nodes would turn into these double torus shapes and sing in a wonderful way. And we've been measuring the length of time of these harmony periods for a while now, and it looked like it was going to be December, where we would come into 4-year harmony or non-stop harmony time for like 200-300 years. I mean, technically it's going to be next March, but which would be very natural. And especially
just to clarify for the people who don't know, that it's linked to the solstices and equinoxes, isn't it?
It starts the day. It started the day before the solstices and equinoxes, which really confused us, because why was it not on the solstices and equinoxes? Until we learned about the ancient Hebrew holy days called the Tekufa, which is the Tekufa means it's the last day of a cycle, and it was clearly reverting to the sun's cycle, and the last day of the sun cycle was always the day before, and that was when the harmony time was, and that's when they called the holy days. And of course, the day after was a celebration day. Everyone remembers the summer solstice, Feast of St. John, and everyone had fun on that day. So that's where you remember it. So that's where it started from, and it then gradually got longer. And it's because of these new powerful source energies which are coming through to the planet, and it comes through to what's causing these lines. And we think it's the neutrinos now getting through to the inner core of our Earth and imparting energy on the inner core, which is, because it's solid, it's expanding and contracting in the liquid outer core, really like a big drum, pounding and like the beating heart of the Earth, which is incidentally exactly what the Anishinaabe thought, and their Medewiwin shaman in their lodges would call it the water drum. The Earth's water drum is beating the Earth's drum beat, and it's essentially getting louder and louder, which is the intensity is increasing because our magnetic field is decreasing. It's the one biggest thing I can't believe no one's talking about, apart from a few independent scientists and researchers. Physicists aren't talking about it. Governments certainly aren't talking about it. But the increase in cosmic energy we're receiving from all other places, the sun included, is really causing an evolutionary change on Earth. And on the energy lines, because the intensity is increasing, we're finding a new phenomenon. I can't remember what I mentioned about shadow lines to you before.
No.
I did write about it in my last newsletter, but it's very interesting that when you've got vibrations coming out from the center of the Earth, it's very similar to seismic waves. I mean, whenever there's an earthquake, the Earth rings like a bell. Well, that ringing is just vibrations going back and forth in standing waves. And if you've got the surface of the Earth, if you have vibrations purposely sent down into the Earth, it bounces back off all the different density contrasts. And the geophysicists find out how the structures of the Earth underneath are for mineralization zones, for where oil deposits are. So what you get is, if any vibrations bounce off these different types of rock and they caught back up in the surface again, and they pick them up on geophones and they get their geoseismic surveys. Well, it's the same, but the vibrations are coming from the center of the Earth and they bounce back off of the density contrast at the surface, off of the density contrast just below them, and back up. So if you've got an energy line here which is getting stronger, one line here, it's bouncing back down again and up again. So you get a shadow line either side of the main line. So the interesting thing is it's giving you the same sort of feeling being on the shadow line as it is on the main line. So where we thought originally that these energy lines would widen and widen and widen, and everywhere would be covered in these energy lines, it's taken this different path where this main energy line is widening. You can still see them widening in a few feet. Well, now the shadow lines have appeared, and you'll probably get shadow lines after that. So it's the rebounds, if you like, of all these vibrations that are causing these things. It's making mapping an absolute headache, I have to say, because you've got so many lines crossing over each other, and you've got to work out which one's the main line, which one's the shadow lines, and they're all crisscrossing. But we're definitely everywhere. The vibration, the linear and high pressure concentrations are going to be everywhere on the surface of the planet, and so that's the big news, that we're being soaked with this.
And that's basically
this way.
The drop in the magnetic shield, and therefore more solar flares are getting through, and it happens to be the peak of the solar cycle 25. And so everything is interconnected in that way. And the ionosphere is more unstable. So is that also linked to more seismic activity potentially? Yeah,
absolutely.
That's in the astrology as well.
Geomagnetic weather is definitely now linked to earthquake prediction as well, where it is getting quite accurate from the point of view of the position of the Earth and the solar storms and that sort of thing. Yeah.
It's so interesting. I've noticed since Pluto moved into Aquarius for the second time in January, everybody is now talking about space weather in a way they never did before. We just talked about the weather, but now it's space weather. There's a much greater awareness of that. So you mentioned that we'll have beginnings of Earth year-round harmony time from about November, December this year, which is exactly when Pluto enters Aquarius for the third time for the next 19 to 20 years. So does that represent an extended period of peace as you see it, Rory?
I'm actually not sure about the word peace, because I look at it more of a form of rapid learning.
Okay.
Where we are really able to connect with the Earth in ways which are more conducive to learning more about the changes going on within us. It's offering us stability at these harmony times, where this you can pretty much go to these energy lines and connect exactly the same way again and again and again, if you choose to do it. This is the whole point about we're always left with a choice. You don't have to do anything, and whatever you'll be like the pinball, bouncing off whatever you're going to be bouncing off, or you can take choice to actually, well, I'm going to embrace this, and I'm going to go on this learning curve, and I'm going to ride that wave, and see where it goes.
Yes.
And everything is like separating out into this choice. You can see it in whether you want to be the helper or whether you want to be helped, whether you want to follow the truth or whether you're happy with your lies. It's just whether you want to learn or whether you want to be lazy. It's incredible how everything has been matched like this. And you think, well, there's a separation, but the weird, strange thing about the separation is that by separating out, it allows the core group to grow and grow and grow. And that attracts more and more people.
Yeah.
So more and more people will come over to the light. That's the positive side. So as for your initial question, whether it'll bring peace, probably not initially. There's an element of motivation that people need.
Yes.
And getting out of rubbish and getting out of the mire, making your choice is the thing. So I can't cope with this anymore. I'm going to find a different way. And that's what we're finding. Lots of people are thinking that right now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and you and I are, in parallel with that. So that it seems to be suggesting, Rory, that we will go back to almost the ancient wisdom that indigenous people have never lost, and that very advanced civilizations in our past, they were just living in harmony with the earth, in right relationship. They understood nature, they understood shamanism, they understood that everything had life force, everything was alive. You seem to be suggesting that that's what we're reconnecting to, because I'm seeing that really clearly in the astrology, particularly the dwarf planet archetypes.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because I'm finding, we talked about the universal prophecy. This is this return to group consciousness that came from Steiner's work originally, and he realized that people go through, mankind goes through cycles of consciousness, from group consciousness to individual consciousness to group consciousness. And it's looking like it's roughly every 12,500 years. And what we're finding, generally speaking, is that the legends of the last time we exited group consciousness have been kept alive. It's like these really magically important stories that the ancestors knew they had to keep alive. I mean, the Hopi group is one example. And it's like, well, this is the exit from paradise that mankind went on. It wasn't Adam and Eve. It was mankind coming through the abyss and coming into having to learn how to live in the world again after. You didn't need to speak. You didn't need to eat. It was like, but you were living in a completely different sensory environment, because the energetic conditions back there had whitened our perceptions to such an extent that we were experiencing life in a completely different way. So this whole exit from this, as these energetic energies started disappearing as we come out of the particular galactic current sheet, I think. But, required us to learn how to work, to talk, to eat, and then so there's the legend side. But now we're getting the prophecies, which tell us of how we're going back into group consciousness. And this is where we start looking at the prophecies from all the different cultures around the world, and they're all talking about the same thing: how we prepare for it, what we could expect, and there's a common theme. When you study them all together, you begin to actually think, whoa, this is now talking about how we're going back into group consciousness and what we're going to learn to expect to find. And working in groups now, we're beginning to see the similarities of how we're moving from individually thinking to group thinking, and how incredibly colorful that's becoming, how 3D thinking is compared to this individual 2D thinking of our own. So I'm really trying to encourage people coming together in groups, and we're working with, as you know, the Sacred Path modules. We're doing dream sharing dreams in groups. This concept that Steiner's talking about with group consciousness, and how we connect in ways to prepare ourselves for this. And he would say we need to start using imagination, and then allowing inspiration to come in. And then when you moved on from that, then you were in that aware state, which allows the intuition and the insights to come through. And when you do that in meditation, these insights come through, and you listen in that aware state to other people's insights, and you get further insights. And all you have to do is start with the right intent and question. And then that's a very personal, curious thing. So you've got to get that out the way at the start in your conscious mind. You've got to then give it that immensity of will to know the truth. Don't care about the answer, just tell me the truth. Get out of the way. Be uncertain so you're not getting involved with it. And then allow your imagination to unfold. And then to go into that inspiration that comes through. And finally, if you're lucky, you'll get that insight, which is just pure magic. And you find it in art, and you find in pictures and music. And so we study these things, and because we're learning more about how we're going back into group consciousness. And this is where I come back to a phenomenal, my son asked me to come and watch a film. And I started watching this film. And about 20 minutes in, I'm in, my jaw is hanging out. I'm going, oh my God, this is another universal prophecy. I'm just thinking, I cannot believe this. And I could how is it going to end? How is he going to do this? And I'm just trying to enjoy the film, but I'm doing this all interpreted because it's mirroring all these same things that you find in the other universal prophecies. And I'm like, I can't believe this. I really can't believe this. And every single symbol has that ambiguity. If you know that, when you realize that symbolism, like Jung says, has to have a necessary ambiguity. If you surrender to that and just let it wash over you, and that sort of coming to know, without us needing to know everything, allow it to wash over you in a form of coming to know. That's a process of moving back to understanding symbolism. It's like the first steps towards moving into that group consciousness and allowing yourself to do that. And I'm hearing, I can't believe this guy who's done this. So I did a bit of investigations because the title of the film didn't seem to sort of suggest this. And of course I realized this was the English title. The original was a Japanese title. And the original Japanese title was How Do You Live? And how do you live is a really interesting question, because if you open to that, we did a group meditation, so how do you live? And then you just allow the subconscious to give you that information. Maybe you just allow that to come through, and you do your imagination and you let the inspiration ride, and you're going to get insights that answer that question, how do you live? So I looked a bit further, and it seems that quite an amazing thing happened, that the person that did the screenplay, that did the writing and the creating of all of this, had said, I didn't know how it was going to end. I just started doing the screenplay and allowed my imagination to run to do what it wanted to do. And he had nobody telling him what he couldn't do, which for a big budget film is rare. Yeah. And so he started exactly the same process as Steiner was talking about. Allow the imagination to go, like Jung did with his inner journey, shamanic journey through the Red Book, which we spent hundreds of hours looking at in the modules. You end up getting this story, and what happened is that the story that was drawing, it's an animation which won an Oscar at the recent Oscars by Hayao Miyazaki, and it's called, in English, it's called The Boy and the Heron. And it's about a boy. It's actually like Miyazaki's childhood. And his father was in the military and industry, but he goes to the countryside and he visits, and he finds things happening to him in the countryside. And that's where the fantasy and the imagination takes off. And you begin to see all these connections. Oh, that means this. Oh, that's that. Oh, my goodness, I can't believe this. So his imagination, with that base first question, has invited the subconscious it's gifted him this prophecy, which links to so many other prophecies. And then the very last part of the film, I wondered how it was going to end. It's like, the boy is told, and you'll forget it all. And of course, that's the moment he then begins to come out of group consciousness, when you've forgotten everything. And I think, I can't believe it. So that, I can't wait for it to come out again because I want to go through it. But The Boy and the Heron, Japanese title, How Do You Live? So it's an example. Yeah, the key thing, which was strange, it was made by the company, the film production called Studio Ghibli. It's exactly the same spelling as Gebel Ghibli, where the place where the primordial mound is next to the pyramids. of Khufu. So I'm just thinking, this is just coming round in circles. It's just more validation in a really roundabout way, but what a ride. So, and
what you're talking about, Rory, is sort of surrendering to divine intelligence as opposed to controlling everything in our small individual minds, which is where we've been certainly all of this lifetime. It's going back to the original way that people lived, in this free flow with divine intelligence in a much more open way. And then you get much more information. So it's almost like remote viewing, isn't it? But on a bigger scale.
But it's collective. This is I mean, there's some great things people did individually, but we're moving into group consciousness, and it's the power of working in groups.
Enter the idea of consciousness being the most fundamental element of the universe. So from that perspective, consciousness is the base of the pyramid.
Consciousness as fundamental is saying the pyramid is pretty close to correct, except that it's not consciousness at the top.
It's at the bottom.
It's actually below physics. In that case, the pyramid of reality is resting upon awareness. So if that were true, it suggests that ultimately everything is mental. From this perspective, your awareness is actually distributed throughout all space and time and the entire universe. So if that is true, it would mean that it's not surprising at all that occasionally your thoughts, your mind are overlapping with somebody else's thoughts and mind because they're all coming out of the same place to begin with. So that would explain telepathy. And then the question is, well, how come we're not telepathic all the time?
It wouldn't be very good for survival on Earth if you're constantly aware of the thoughts and feelings and placement of everyone around you. You're not going to make it in the jungle or New York.
Conscious awareness is usually the worst condition for somebody to be in order to receive these kinds of telepathic connections.
This is why many successful telepathy studies, like the Ganzfeld experiment, put people into a state of sensory deprivation. Because when our brains are fully alert, taking in everything, firing on all cylinders, they aren't as open to telepathy or other psi-type abilities.
A person's brain is constantly rejecting that kind of information.
Meaning our brains may have developed to help us block out more psychic and telepathic states.
So if we now look at people who are neurodivergent, perhaps they're already in that state.
Meaning maybe some neurodiverse people are missing the shield, so to speak, the shield that keeps out everyone's thoughts and feelings and all the information floating out there. A sciencey way to talk about this shield is called a dissociative boundary. I have a boundary that says I'm Kai and Diane is Diane and you're you.
What we might call my dissociative boundary, meaning my feeling of separation from someone else, at looking at them as other.
But if the basis of the entire world is consciousness, then we aren't really separate at all. It helps us to survive in the world to believe that we are, to keep our bodies functioning. But that separateness, it might be an illusion.
In order to have experiences, we have to create the illusion of separation.
As you talked about with children with autism, they don't have that dissociative boundary.
And if the non-speakers that we've met don't have the same dissociative boundary that the rest of us do, then they may be tapped into every aspect of consciousness, all the psi phenomenon that evidence shows us exists. They might be the gateway to validating that this new way of thinking about the world, the paradigm that says consciousness is the base of everything, is correct. I asked Dr. Wollicott if there's anything from her research that might show that telepathy is a basic underlying form of communication that our little physical dissociative boundaries might choose to ignore.
There are a number of cases of people with near-death experiences. So they have died, the cardiac arrest, the EEG is stopped, they come back after maybe an hour or something like that, where they have not been present in this reality, but they come back with special new skills, including this ability to sense what other people are thinking. And I should say that it drives a lot of these people crazy because they didn't want it and they don't know how to deal with it because suddenly they have what you might call too porous a boundary between them and other people, and it can get in their way of living a normal life.
I'm not totally sure what to make of this, but if your body flatlines and your consciousness is less tied to the physical body and brain, maybe it's allowed to access the broader sea of awareness and come back with a bit more of that awareness, like telepathy. So is all psi phenomena tapping into the same thing, this underlying fabric of consciousness?
We'll give a label of telepathy for mind-to-mind communication. We'll have a label of precognition for perception of something in the future, or retrocognition for something in the past, or clairvoyance for just perception in general through space and time, psychokinetic effects for mind-matter interaction. There are ways that phenomena appear, And the ways that we create labels to explain how they manifest, but it's really one thing. That's why the jargon in the field is psi. It's all psi, but it's all coming out of the same underlying phenomena.
And that underlying phenomena would be the base of the pyramid, the foundation of consciousness, which is at the root of everything. Some people might call this the quantum field or collective consciousness. Other people might call it God. Some might call it the universe or energy or the Akashic record. Whatever it is, it seems to be describing this one powerful, unifying foundational force. Telepathy is happening amongst non-speaking individuals. You met Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. He's a Cambridge biologist who's authored more than 100 papers in peer-reviewed journals and written 9 books. He reached out to Dr. Powell when he first read about her research. And the story that inspired their meeting is fascinating.
Rupert Sheldrake is well known for his research on animal telepathy, and not just animal telepathy, but telepathy between people and their pets who are like family members.
Dr. Sheldrake, just like every scientist I met, never set out to study telepathy. But early in his academic career, he was sitting in the tea room at Cambridge University when he learned about a disabled child who could see through his mother's eyes.
We had a tea room in the laboratory where we had breaks. And once the subject of telepathy came up, and I just dismissed it as rubbish and superstition and so on.
He had a professor whom he really respected tell him about an experiment that was done with a blind boy.
This professor, who forever changed Rupert's life, was named Sir Rudolph Peters, a biochemist with such an incredible contribution to academia that he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth.
Sir Rudolph Peters told me about an investigation he'd done with a severely disabled child.
It's impossible to know what the boy's diagnosis would have been today, but at the time, which would have been the 1950s, he was deemed severely mentally disabled, and he was almost completely blind. And the boy's ophthalmologist was shocked during a checkup because this boy who could not see was reading the eye chart from across the room.
He did phenomenally well on those eye charts, the ophthalmologist. He just couldn't believe what was happening. So then he thought maybe the mother had something to do with it. So he sent her out of the room, and this young man couldn't do it.
This boy was able to read the eye chart only when his mother was in the room looking at the eye chart as well, and couldn't if she'd left.
Sound familiar? So nearly 60 years ago, Sir Rudolph Peters looked at this and came to a very similar conclusion that Dr. Powell did when she was studying children with severe autism who seemed to be able to read through their mother's eyes.
He came to the conclusion that somehow the mother was communicating telepathically to her son.
So Sir Rudolph Peters crafted an experiment to see if mind reading was occurring between the blind boy and his mother.
They got the mother in one laboratory, sitting by the telephone, and they had the boy in another laboratory about 5 miles away, and they recorded the whole thing on a tape recorder. They showed the mother a series of cards with letters or numbers on them, and the boy then said what it was, a number or letter. And the results were staggeringly higher than the chance level.
And when Sir Rudolph Peters told Rupert Sheldrake about this research in the tea room at Cambridge, it changed the course of Rupert's life.
It made me think that at least some people can develop an astonishing ability. I think it's probably more common in animals than people to develop this ability because animals, after all, can't communicate through normal speech.
Dr. Sheldrake has done remarkable research around telepathy in the animal kingdom. And Marianne Harrington, who you met in the beginning of the episode, said her former students have access to so much information and knowledge that asking them to spell it out is like trying to suck an elephant through a straw.
The knowledge, they have access to all of it. Everything's there. It's all floating around, and I kind of serve as the current so they can get the information through.
Which makes you wonder if two-way telepathy is the key to helping non-speakers share with us all that they know.
They want to share their knowledge. I think they have a lot to teach us.
In episode 4, you heard Dr. Powell mention the possibility that consciousness is something we can tap into. Listening to Marianne describe how Anthony accesses information, it sure seems that way. Anthony explained that there's a knowledge base that's just floating around and he can access all of it. But relaying this information through a letterboard is pretty restricting. And Marianne, having figured out how to receive his thoughts via telepathy, says she can act as a current to help him funnel his knowledge from out there in the ether into our tangible 3D world. To close, I want to return to Jess in England. Her student Asher, that 6-year-old boy that was causing mischief all those years ago in class, decided to stop using his voice once he became an adult. He found telepathy to be a much more streamlined way of communicating. And here's what he had to say about that.
He said, when I and some other neurodiverse people produce sound, it does not come easily. To others, it sounds discordant. Words are a kind of freezing of ideas and sounds into symbols. And for that reason, they can create a barrier or problem for some neurodiverse people. When we try to speak, we must consider volume, pitch, tone, expression, and intention in order to communicate verbally, as well as creating the actual sounds with breath, mouth, and throat. Those things are exhausting and difficult. It's such a crude method of communicating compared to telepathy. After all, we usually know what others are thinking. It would be so much easier if they could feel our thoughts.
Wow. So yes, telepathy may be the best way to open up this incredible group of people so they can share all that they know and have access to.
When I was younger, I just thought, why can't we just all communicate in a telepathic way? So everybody would know instantly, from image to image, the whole context, have the whole picture, right? Because at a young age, I had trouble expressing myself, and then there was the situational mutism and shyness, and all of that had a big impact on expressing myself verbally. And usually I just didn't talk too much. Was very silent, and when it came to defending myself in words, impossible. And that seemed unfair to me, because I could never really express how I felt or what was going on. And I thought, if I could just send an image to my teacher mentally, that would be great. And she would know. She would know the truth. And telepathy is about truth, honesty. So language would become unnecessary. Language, in my opinion, is more obstructive and never adequate to express everything. But telepathically, you could just send an image with all attached to it. The meaning